Great. So it looks like we're holding steady now with the participants. So I think we're going to begin. So good morning, everyone. I am Lori Enns, the SSH Writing Center Coordinator at Nazarbayev University, where all students, staff, and faculty are eligible for one-on-one writing appointments. To find out more about that, please visit our website. Now, normally we hold writing workshops at the university in a classroom face-to-face. But it's summer 2020. We can't do that this summer. The pandemic is making us change our past practices. So we're doing webinars. This is the 6th in a suite of webinars that we've been doing for summer 2020. And it is entitled Hook, Line, and Sinker, Techniques for Capturing Your Reader's Attention. And it's coming to you from Greg Duran, who is a faculty member in our department. I'm going to say a little bit more about him in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to send out a poll. Because we would like to know who is joining us. I'm going to launch it now. Just let us know, are you a student or not? You might not be a student. Are you an undergraduate student or a graduate student? Are you at NU or at some other university? Just let us know. So I'm going to end this poll and I'm going to pass it over to Professor Duran. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Lori. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I'll go ahead and share the screen with the PowerPoint presentation so that you guys can see what's going on. There we go. So, hook, line, and sinker. This is sort of a thing that we say when we've caught something fairly easily. Not sure where the expression comes from exactly, other than from fishing lingo. In any case, when we are talking about writing essays, it's always a good idea to capture and captivate our readers' attention. So I thought that it would be nice to go over some of the techniques for doing that. And they're fairly simple, but I find that students often begin their essays with something perhaps a little bit overused, dare I say a little bit cliche. So sometimes it's nice as a teacher, obviously someone who reads scores and scores of essays per semester. It's always nice to see when a student is using some creativity where it's allowed, which is generally in the introduction. So let's talk about a few of these techniques. But first I'm going to take you on a trip through the field of business marketing. I hope that you guys enjoy a multidisciplinary approach. Fantastic. Okay, so say your job is to design a new logo for a beer. You know, everybody likes beer. Well, some people do. Next. And so you have a design team and they're working on it day and night. You know, these folks subsist on caffeine and whatnot. And so they come up with the following designs for you to choose from. Next. Which, depending on your design background, you might not choose either one. But let's just say this is a no-name beer, right? So if you had to decide which packaging was the most eye-catching, would you choose A or would you choose B? Which one would you choose, Lori?
Gosh, probably B.
B, yeah, but I mean, there's a nice simplicity to
yes
to A, but it's a little bit dated looking, right? Anyway, let's do the next slide. Yeah, I think most people would. I mean, it's just a bit more eye-catching. The colors are not, you know, anything fancy, but there you go. Next. So when we write essays, it's not a bad idea also to package, you know, to borrow from the marketing field what it is we want to say. As I mentioned before, a lot of your readers, your readership basically is your teacher, and it's always a good idea to keep your teacher awake, number one, while reading your essay and grading it. So it is in your best interest, when you think about it, to come up with something eye-catching and memorable that your teacher will definitely thank you for later. Next. So let's talk about the concept of a hook. This is a way to grab your reader's focus from the very beginning. We call it a hook because really it's about hooking the attention of somebody passing by. Sometimes it's called, a come on, or a promotion of some kind. I mean, if we want to use the most crass, marketing terms that we can come up with, we can. But for our purposes, we simply call it a hook. Next. In business, it definitely is a term used to attract customers' attention to get them to buy a product or service. So, obviously you're not selling your essay for money, but you are selling it in a way, in a figurative way, to your reader. Next. So, in a nutshell, the essay hook is a sentence that grabs the reader's attention and gives them a reason to keep going. Next. So there are a few things to keep in mind. So one thing we need to be aware of is that readers can have a short attention span. So correspondingly, we should write hooks that are a bit short. They shouldn't be more than a few sentences. There are a few exceptions, as you'll see later, when using a personal story or an anecdote for a hook, but in general, they should be quite short and sweet. A hook should be also snappy. What I mean by that is that the language should sort of jump off the page. It should be fresh and accessible. You don't want to bog the reader down with lots of very archaic or technical language. You don't want to bog them down with too many numbers or statistics. When they read it, it should theoretically roll off the tongue. It should be easy to read. And one thing that a lot of people don't think about when writing hooks is that you don't want to necessarily give away the thesis so quickly, right? You can build up a little bit of suspense in your introduction with the background information that you're going to provide. So try to use a hook that maybe is on the topic, but is slightly off center. And the example hook that we're going to see in a moment is a good example of that as well. Okay, so next slide. So what can you use for a hook? Well, I would recommend 4 basic, what's the word? Not ways, but 4 basic techniques, I guess. You can use a famous quote or a quotation. Or maybe something very wise that somebody said who wasn't very famous, but in any case, a quote that somebody actually said that you can attribute to somebody either living or dead. I think this is probably the most common type of hook, and a very popular one and a very effective one. In a way, it's showing that you, from the very beginning, that you've researched your topic, and you found, you're going to be quoting from experts throughout your paper, if it's a research paper, but you're also using quotations in a way to attract the reader. You can find a saying or a proverb from a book. Oftentimes we find them on the internet now, but there's lots of wise words that have been said over the years by either our grandparents or scholars along the way, and have become part of our linguistic culture and history. So many wise things have been said and kind of preserved as proverbs. So you can use one of those as well. You can use a fact or statistic. It should be something a little bit startling or surprising, but not necessarily shocking, but something that makes a reader sit back and say, I didn't know that, or wow, that's really quite a surprising fact. You can also use an anecdote, and an anecdote basically is just a personal story. But I would caution about using your own personal story. I think it's more effective if you use an anecdote that is somebody else's in order to illustrate an idea from your essay. And the idea behind an anecdote is that it doesn't need to be something like a story that you've reported directly from somebody. It can be what we call a composite of perhaps different experiences. So you kind of maybe place, if you're talking about a certain person, maybe you come up with a name that is not necessarily the real person's name. And basically the idea is that you construct a tale or a personal story that is plausible, that could be true, that most people would not say, I don't know, I don't know about that being true. It's relatable, and it's something that could be true. And it's just basically a way to engage your reader and draw them into the topic. And sometimes, you use any combination of those. Sometimes I like to take a proverb and corrupt it in a way. I like to rewrite it, since they don't belong to anybody anyway, right? They're old and have been with us for thousands of years. I might take a proverb and personalize it to my topic and make it a little more, it's something, the rhythm of it is still familiar to readers, but I've made it more personal and made it more appropriate to my topic. So, you can be creative above all with your essay hooks. All right, next slide, please. So let's take a look at this sample hook within the context of an introduction. And this is a good example of a hook that is slightly off topic, but draws us quickly back into the topic. Okay, so we've gone with a very common saying. A dog is man's best friend. At least that's true in some parts of the world. That common saying may contain some truth, but dogs are not the only animal friend whose companionship people enjoy. For many people, a cat is their best friend. Despite what dog lovers may believe, cats make excellent pets because they are good companions, they are civilized members of the household, and they're easy to care for. Okay, so we have a very sort of truncated, short introduction here, but it contains basically all the elements that a good essay introduction needs. It has a hook, and note that the essay focus is really about the value of cats as pets, but we've used a common saying about dogs in order to sort of build a little contrast to that. We've kind of got them thinking about pets and animals, but we're kind of switch it up at the end. So that sort of adds a little bit of an interest, an element to it. So a dog is man's best friend. That is our hook. But the hook cannot stand alone, right? The hook needs to be somehow worked into the essay. So it's very important that when you write a hook, that you also write a transition sentence. The transition sentence is in this case is the one that follows it. That common saying may contain some truth, but dogs are not the only animal friends. So we're acknowledging that we have used a quotation or kind of something outside the universe of our essay. We're acknowledging that we've kind of put it there randomly, but we're going to make it relevant. We're going to say, these words, are relevant because, right? We're not going to let it just sit there and speak for itself. We have to acknowledge it. We have to, just like we attribute quotes with in-text citations with our research paper, we're also going to somehow attribute, acknowledge, and make clear why this particular hook is relevant to our essay. Okay, it's very important that a hook always goes with a transition. Okay, next slide, please. So the transition sentence is crucial because it explains why your hook is relevant. Okay, so again, this is just more emphasis about why it's so very important to have that transition. Okay, next, please. Remember, a hook without a transition is like a head without a neck. Sorry for that creepy photo, but I think it sort of sums it up. All right, next, please.
In a macabre way.
It's very macabre, yes. Okay, so the transition was still in transition sentence because, and the reason I've focused so much on this is that, you know, in my years of teaching students or instructing them to write hooks, I inevitably get essays that have a wonderfully chosen quotation or proverb or anecdote, but they're just sort of awkward. They're just sort of slapped there at the top of the introduction without any transition, without any smooth easing into the rest of the essay. So they feel foreign, they feel out of place. So it's very important that you use this to bridge to your background section, because all those ideas are going to help your reader to kind of get into your paper and to understand your thesis ultimately. So I provided here kind of a list of all the things that your introduction really need to have. You know, these are the essentials. It needs to have a hook. It needs to have a transition from that hook. And then from the transition, we go into some background information. And then even from the background information, we still need another transition to basically what is the heart or the focus of our essay, which is the all-important thesis statement, which was the subject of my last webinar, as some of you might recall. So all these elements are super important in order to bring your reader in smoothly into your essay. I really think the introduction is probably the most important part of the essay, and we don't spend nearly enough time writing it, crafting it, perfecting it. So keep that in mind. Your introduction really is, you know, the first impression that the reader has of your essay, and it's super important to get it right every time. Okay, next slide, please. So how do you write a hook? So the thesis statement does hold some of the answers, because the thesis statement is where the crux of your topic is. So let's just say for this workshop, I'm going to be giving you a bunch of example hooks, but they're going to be all going to be based on the same topic, which is the idea that there are certain very important, indispensable career skills that a university education provides. Basically, if you want to do well in a career, you need to go to college. That's kind of, you know, certainly not a controversial idea. I think a lot of people would agree with that. You know, some people might disagree with it. People like filmmaker Woody Allen, who dropped out of college and ended up being very successful. You can probably quote a lot of examples of people who never went to college or finished college, but who were nonetheless still successful. But I would say 90% of the population out there would say, yeah, I would agree with that. And that's basically what you want. We can't convince 100% of the people, but we want to at least go with a thesis or a theme that will convince most people. So next slide, please. So we've boiled it down to 3 skills: knowledge that you need for the job, social contacts that you need to get a job, and the maturity and work ethic that you need to keep a job. So we've kind of kept it a little parallel. It's like what you need to do a job, what you need to get a job, and what you need to keep a job. So knowing these things, we can now begin brainstorming for a hook. And again, any type of the 4 types of hooks, anecdote, statistic, we can use any type of hook for practically any topic. I mean, there might be a few things that don't work out, but in general, you're going to see that we can find hooks of all times based on this topic. Okay, so when we brainstorm, next slide. When we brainstorm, we've come up with a few ideas, and these are by no means all of the possible ones. You could come up with probably 100, but these are the ones that came to my mind first. The ideas for a hook could be a hook that talks about the importance of education in general, about attaining your goals, your life goals, or the objectives that you set for yourself, about what it takes to get a job, about getting the right types of training, about having money earning potential, general ideas about preparing for the future. Again, all these ideas are somehow tangentially related to the idea of the importance of a university education. Again, you could probably come up with 10 more very easily, but these are the ones that I came up with. Okay, next slide, please. So here's an example, our first hook that is based on the theme that we're doing. So the best way to find quotes is to do Google search. Google is your friend. It is extremely helpful and useful. And so we do a Google search on, I don't know, maybe the importance of knowledge or university education or higher academic studies. And actually the problem is not going to be finding a quote. It's going to be deciding among the hundreds and hundreds which is the best quote to use. So you will have a flood of possibilities, and so this is where you as an editor come in and decide which is the best. So I've chosen this one by Benjamin Franklin. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Okay, so the idea being that it's a bit of a metaphor about how when you invest in yourself, can be similar to investing money in a good venture, right? That pays off in dividends, right? So it's interesting, that even back then, that the world of business was already being used in a figurative way in quotations. Next slide. So note that this quote also has a transition. Though first uttered more than 200 years ago, this quote by one of America's founding fathers still has significance when considering the value of an education in today's career marketplace. Okay, so again, we need to make it relevant. We need to bring it up to date. We need to explain why we've used it and to somehow transition the reader into the body of our introduction. Okay, next slide. So here's an example of a proverb that we've used as a hook. So again, you probably would find this on Google, but if you happen to have a book of proverbs lying around, you could probably do it the old-fashioned way. Our proverb is, a jade stone is useless before it is processed. A man is good for nothing until he is educated. Okay, so this sounds like a very wise, old and probably thousands of years type of saying and proverb. You can almost hear the music, the East Asian music going on in the background as this is read, right? It really evokes a mood. But the thing is that many of the sentiments are very easily understood, which makes it a classic proverb. Next slide. So here's a transition sentence. These wise words are just as meaningful today as when they were first written thousands of years ago when discussing education's value. Okay, so again, it's basically a very similar thing that we did with the proverb, considering they're both, definitely more than 100 years old, that we have to kind of bring them into today and make them meaningful for today's audience. Okay, all right, next slide. So this is how we use a statistic or a fact as a hook. And these can be very effective, especially if you are the type of person who really enjoys using facts. According to data compiled by Eurostat, which is a European Union statistics website, those with a high level of education, at least 1 year of college, will earn 50% more than those who only get a high school education. Okay, so using something impactful, something convincing, something surprising like this is another way to reach your reader, to sort of tickle their curiosity and to make them, as I said, that all important take that all-important pause and go, yeah, that's very interesting. I never really thought about it that way. Or maybe I realized that college graduates earned more than those who were not, but 50% more, that's pretty significant. Okay, next slide. Again, even a fact or statistic needs a transition sentence. The numbers don't lie. If you're interested in making money, university is the way to go. Okay, so again, it depends on what you want to focus on. If you want to focus on education for its own sake, then you go for a wise and time-told quotation from a Chinese proverb book. But if you want to appeal to the business side of things, or people who are interested in financial motives, having financial motives for going to college, this would appeal to them as well. Okay, next. So then we have the all-important and very useful anecdote as a hook. And again, make this clear that this is not necessarily a true story, but the idea is that it could be true. And this is why it is effective, because we have sort of gathered a composite of facts and sort of created this anecdote in order to illustrate our point. When Alihan was a boy in rural Kazakhstan, his father hoped his firstborn son would grow up and take over the family farm. But Alihan, a straight-A student, had dreams of bigger things. So when the boy turned 18, the family made the wrenching decision to send their son off to university. Okay. So again, notice that we're not going to delve too deeply into this composite boy's life, right? We give just the basics, just enough for people to understand where it is we're coming from with this anecdote, and to illustrate that regardless of your background or your history, personal history, that people seem to agree that prioritizing university education is something that is really important for young people. Okay, next slide. Again, our transition is to acknowledge this anecdote. This drama is replayed in thousands of homes each year. Parents placing their child's future over the needs of the family by recognizing the value of an education. Okay, so I think that a lot of people, perhaps even NU students, can probably relate to this story, even though, as I said, it's just a composite, but it could be true. All right, next slide. Okay, so, we made it. Let's try writing our own hooks. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of effort on your part. I would open up a Microsoft Word document if you're on your computer, or, of course, I know a lot of my students write their stuff on their smartphones. You can do that as well. And in case, however you decide to do it, we're going to look for a quote or proverb only. Don't look for statistics or anecdotes, because those might be a little bit harder to find, but quotes and proverbs are very easy to find. So you will do Google searches on the topic of the benefits of learning a foreign language. And trust me, there are hundreds and hundreds of quotes and proverbs on this very topic. So the steps to follow are, for a moment, just brainstorm some of the things about learning, about foreign languages, about travel, about studying something new. Just think about a couple of different themes, and then for the second step, plug in those themes to Google and see with the words quote and proverb. So you can say quotes about language learning, quotes about globalism, maybe, quotes about intercultural relations, things like that. Quotes about French. If you happen to be interested in the French language, maybe there's something about a quote about French. Okay, so do a Google search and survey and consider the possibilities for quotations and proverbs, and then choose one, and then make sure that you get the attribution, meaning whoever wrote it should be given credit, right, or whoever said it. If there's no attribution, you can simply call it the wise words of somebody, right? But it's better to have, you know, a credit, you know, someone who haven't known that it comes from a particular individual or from a particular book. And then once you have cut and paste that quote and the attribution, think of a way to transition that quote or that proverb into the body of your introduction, right? With saying something like, you know, this quotation, comma, though thousands of years old, is still meaningful today because blah, 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 something like that. I mean, the transition sentences really don't vary that much, but what they do is they acknowledge the fact that you are sort of bringing something random from nowhere into your essay and explaining the relevance. And then once you're done with that, share your hook plus transition with the group by sending it to the chat.
We have a Ludwig Wittgenstein quote. So we have one, it doesn't yet have a transition sentence, but it's the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. That's a good one.
See that? That's a fabulous one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're getting quite a few. Okay, so Carly Gosh. One language sets you in a corridor for life. Two languages open every door along the way. Like that. That's from Idana.
Every door? Frank Smith? I
yes.
know. If Frank Smith were here, I would ask him. That seems really asking.
Give you more specific.
It's a good trope.
A Czech proverb says, learn a new language and get a new soul.
Oh,
nice.
That's so poetic.
It's really interesting how such a detail as language can change a person's thinking. That is why language learning is an essential step in understanding the world and different perspectives on it. Mm-hmm. Very nice. That's from Anel. It's a very nice transition and explaining. From Rabiga, we've got learn a language and you'll avoid a war, which is an Arab proverb. Nice. A very old but still relevant proverb that has deep meaning, because having learned the language, you can come to peace through negotiations. Very nice start. Mm-hmm. Then Marjan has one from Goethe. Those who know nothing of foreign languages know nothing of their own. This is very true. Oh,
interesting.
If you've ever studied a foreign language, you realize how little you do know about your own, right?
Especially true, and how many presuppositions you have of the world. You only know that when you know somebody else's language.
Exactly. And then we have from Madi, as long as you know the language, you will find the way. So is that a quote or is that a proverb? Don't forget the attribution, guys. This is very important when we select hooks. From Acelia, we have, the most remembered to me was the words of great Nelson Mandela that go, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I understood that my future profession will be closely connected to the educational system, and my aim is to improve my knowledge and study law for being a leader in my specialty. Okay, so it looks like Acelia has done one on the importance of an education, which is good. I like that too. From Masood, we have a different language is a different vision of life. Okay. So how about some transition, folks? Because it's easy to find a proverb. It's not so easy to write those transitions.
So Abilai in chat has given us a transition sentence from the Czech proverb.
Oh, okay. Let's take a look at that one then. Learn a new language and get a new soul. Czech proverb. As that proverb suggests, foreign languages can highly contribute to your life overall, even form your new character. However, if you think about it, the benefits might be limitless. So let's discuss it in this essay. All right, very nice. Okay. I like this, especially at the beginning, as it begins, as that proverb suggests, right? I mean, I think you need that acknowledgement and that within the introduction that you have that you have introduced, again, something foreign to your essay, and you're accounting for it being there, as opposed to just sort of plopping it there and expecting it to talk for itself. Very nice. We have some very industrious participants today.
Technologically apt.
Indeed, more than I am. It's a pretty low bar, I admit. Interesting. Okay, we've got a few more. Look at this. The webinar chat is filling up with stuff.
Yeah.
From Azat, we have Federico Fellini, who is a famous Italian director, right? Film director. Federico Fellini said that a different language is a different vision of life. Okay. This is because during the studying, you have to learn new texts, cultures, and lifestyles. All these things show you the new vision to life. Not bad. We could smooth that one out, but I think it's a good start. Then we have a quote from Rita Mae Brown. Language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they're going. That's very apt, and especially if you're going to talk about language as maybe a path to travel or a path to doing international business. I think it's pretty well on the nose. From Muldir, we have a Persian proverb says, "A new language is a new life." So if you learn languages, you will be familiar with new lifestyles and cultures. It opens you to a new door of the world. Okay, this is good, but again, be a little more excuse me, overt with your acknowledgement of the proverb. You know, say that not so much that you're explaining the proverb, but you're acknowledging and transitioning from the proverb. A lot of the proverbs explain themselves, right? So it's not necessarily useful for you to repeat some of the things, but it is useful for you to transition. So I might improve this one by saying a new language is a new life. You know, these ages-old ideas apply when it's time to explore different lifestyles and cultures of the world, something like this, right? So make sure that you're applying it and transitioning and acknowledging that you've just said a quote, not just explain.
Right. So in this case, you're making it very clear that what you've just given was not your own voice, but now you're using that voice in your own paper.
Yeah, it's part of, you know, the you know, in a less formal way, it is in-text citation, right? But with hooks, we have a little more leeway. We don't have to follow all the same rules, and generally because we're using, you know, time-tested ideas that don't necessarily come from a scholarly journal and are not necessarily original, but, you know, we still need to acknowledge and attribute them. Let's see here. The next one, I don't know who that's from because I don't seem to read it, but from Anastasia, looks like. Language shapes the way we think and determines what we can think about, by Benjamin Lee Whorf. Nowadays, this thought is as relevant as it has ever been before. The unprecedented pace in science and technology is unimaginable without close collaborations among people from diverse cultures and various backgrounds. That's why studying more than one foreign language becomes more and more popular each day. Bravo. That's great. That's basically an introduction. Well written. Okay, so from Idana, what was Idana's quote? So this is why I didn't want them separate, because I don't have a good memory for these types of things. Idana's quote was, "One language sets you in a corridor for life. Two languages open a door, every door along the way," which Lori had issue with, but we're just going to go past that. And now Idana's transition is, "This statement maybe the famous linguist has an incredible correspondence with the era of globalization where we live now. As for today, knowledge of more than one foreign, maybe she meant language, language gives you opportunity to travel, work, and communicate, in other words, to live your great life. Great, I like that a lot. And Arujan says, he who knows no foreign languages knows nothing of his own. I think we saw that one before. Maybe this is the transition now.
Mm-hmm.
Although this quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe might sound harsh, there can be a certain truth to it. It does sound a little harsh. I like that there's an acknowledgement of that. An inference can be made that an individual with as much language as he has mastered may possess a vast amount of mastery and enlightenment. Ooh, now we're getting deep. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
My only thing would be, along with your hook and your transition, make sure that you're not going too deep, right? In the beginning, you're kind of easing people into depth. So I would say maybe make the language a little more snappy, but I think that the ideas are very good.
Okay, so I guess then that's it. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Thank you to Greg Duran for giving us this presentation on how to make your introductions more interesting with your hooks. So stay safe, and we will see you at our next webinar.
Thanks, Lori,
Just
and
tomorrow,
thanks
by
to
the way.
everybody for coming.